Imagine your social and professional life is like a massive, intricate switchboard.
Right, like an old school telephone exchange.
Exactly. And for the past few years, you've been, plugging and unplugging cords. You're trying to route the signals, trying to get the audio to come through clearly.
And mostly getting static, I'd imagine.
Yeah, exactly. Mostly static. Sometimes you get a spark,
Yeah.
right? Like a brief connection. But yeah, it's mostly just isolated voices talking over each other.
It's exhausting just thinking about it.
It really is. But what happens when suddenly the geometry of the sky shifts, right? The power surges, and every single node on that switchboard just lights up simultaneously.
Oh, wow. That's a serious power surge.
Right. You aren't just trying to make a connection anymore. You are the main conduit for the entire grid. The current is literally running directly through you.
Which is an incredible amount of energy to hold.
It is. And that is the exact landscape we are looking at today. So, welcome to the deep dive. This is your custom-tailored roadmap for Gemini in April 2026.
And it's a landscape that requires, a completely different operating manual than what you've been using for the past 12 months.
For sure, because when the grid lights up like that, the sheer volume of information can be overwhelming.
Yeah, the opportunity alone can easily short-circuit the system if you aren't prepared for the voltage.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because our mission today isn't just to hand you a calendar with a few circled dates.
Right. Anyone can pull up an ephemeris and tell you where Mars is. That's easy.
Exactly. We're going to deconstruct the underlying mechanics of this specific window in time. We really need to understand the structural why behind these shifts.
And the overarching theme for you this month is, it's the social visionary.
The social visionary. I love that. So you are positioned as the definitive connector of the Zodiac right now.
You really are.
Yeah.
But to harness that, we have to look at the macro environment first.
Yeah, the weather report for the month.
Yeah.
We have to look at the architecture of the 11th house, right? Because the sun is transiting there for the first 3 weeks of April.
Yeah. And the 11th house transit is fascinating because it fundamentally alters your relationship with the collective.
How so? Like, what's the baseline for a Gemini normally?
Well, for a Gemini, your baseline state is already highly communicative. I mean, you are constantly gathering data, observing, engaging with people.
Right, very chatty, very curious.
Exactly. But when the solar spotlight hits the 11th house, the focus shifts. It moves away from just one-on-one dialogue or simple data gathering.
Okay, so where does it go?
It shifts to your role within complex systems. It's about your social legacy, your networks, and the larger communities you orbit.
So the atmosphere is highly kinetic, but it demands a very specific kind of focus.
It really does. There's a stark difference here between just accumulating contacts and actually cultivating a visionary network.
But that distinction is everything, honestly, because I think the concept of, networking has been completely corrupted.
Oh, absolutely. It has a terrible reputation.
It does. It conjures up this grim image of standing in a hotel conference room wearing a flimsy name tag.
Drinking terrible coffee.
Right. Drinking bad coffee, trading business cards with people you have absolutely no intention of ever speaking to again.
It's purely transactional. Performative extraction, really.
Performative extraction, exactly. You're looking at someone and running a subconscious calculation of, like, what can you do for my career?
Which is, frankly, the exact opposite of what this 11th house transit is demanding from you right now.
So that hotel conference room scenario, what is that astrologically?
Well, I'd say that's a very localized, low-vibration manifestation of air energy. It's movement without depth.
Just skimming the surface.
Yeah. The 11th house, in its highest expression, is about humanitarianism. It's about collective evolution, shared utopian ideals.
So it's about finding the people who are vibrating at your exact intellectual frequency.
Exactly. It's not about what they can do for you on a resume.
The analogy I keep returning to for this specific April energy is, well, it's the contrast between a nightclub and a highly curated dinner party.
Oh, that's a great way to look at it. Break that down.
So think about the nightclub environment. It's just overwhelming sensory input. The bass is shaking the floor. You're surrounded by hundreds of bodies.
And you have to scream directly into someone's ear just to ask for the time.
Right. There is a massive amount of kinetic energy, but the actual exchange of real information is essentially zero.
Yeah, you leave exhausted, your ears are ringing, and you've connected with literally no one.
Despite being surrounded by everyone, it's wild.
Which is actually a perfect metaphor for the doom-scrolling, superficial engagement we often mistake for staying connected these days.
Yes. It's the illusion of community.
Pure illusion.
Precisely. Now, shift the environment to the curated dinner party. You invite, say, 6 people.
Okay, nice intimate number.
Right. And you don't invite them because they share your exact industry or because they can give you a job.
You're curating for mindsets.
Exactly. You invite the architect, the behavioral psychologist, the struggling novelist, maybe the urban planner.
People with interlocking but contrasting perspectives.
Yes. And the volume in the room is low enough for actual nuance.
You can actually hear each other think.
Exactly. So the architect throws out a theory on spatial design, right? And then the psychologist catches it and applies it to human anxiety.
And then the novelist weaves that into a narrative.
Exactly. And you, the Gemini, you are sitting at the head of the table. You aren't dominating the conversation, but you are acting as the catalyst.
You poured the wine, you set the table, you brought the minds together.
You are watching a completely new philosophy synthesize in real time right in front of you. That is intentional networking.
And that is the 11th house in action, truly.
Right. So how does the rest of the astrology support this?
Well, what's fascinating here is how that dinner party dynamic is being supercharged by the really heavy planetary mechanics operating in the background this month.
Oh, right. We definitely cannot discuss this period without dissecting the Saturn-Neptune conjunction happening in Aries.
No, we can't. This conjunction is literally the engine driving the entire month.
Let's break down the geometry of that conjunction because it feels like a massive astrological paradox.
It is a massive paradox. You have Saturn, which is the principle of limitation, gravity, boundary, and chronological time.
The rule maker.
Yes. And it's occupying the exact same degree of the Zodiac as Neptune, which is the principle of dissolution, timelessness, the collective unconscious, and boundless imagination.
So pure structure meeting pure fog.
Exactly. And they're conjunct in Aries, which is the sign of the spark, the initiator.
It is a profound contradiction. How does that even work geometrically?
Well, energetically, Saturn crystallizes what Neptune dissolves. So for a significant portion of the collective, this transit is deeply disorienting.
I can imagine. It sounds incredibly stressful.
It is. When Saturn's demand for stark, undeniable reality crashes into Neptune's idealized misty visions, the psychological result for many people is just a crushing sense of disillusionment.
They feel paralyzed.
Completely paralyzed. They're caught between a world that feels too heavy and a dream that feels too impossible to manifest.
It's like they are trying to pour concrete over the ocean.
That is the perfect way to phrase it, yes.
But the forecast for the Gemini listener suggests a completely different physical reaction to this conjunction, right?
It does. Because this alignment is happening in your 11th house of hopes, dreams, and social networks, you aren't being crushed by the paradox.
You're doing something else with it.
Right. You're being asked to act as the alchemist.
The alchemist. Okay, explain that. That alchemy is the core of the social visionary archetype, isn't it?
Yes. A Gemini possesses the cognitive flexibility to hold two opposing ideas in their mind without their internal system crashing.
We are very good at multitasking concepts.
Exactly. So you can perceive these sweeping, utopian, almost naive visions of Neptune-like, the desire to radically heal or shift your community.
But instead of getting lost in that fantasy, we do what?
You engage Saturn. You don't just dream, right?
Yeah.
You build the spreadsheet for the dream.
Oh, I love that. You draft the bylaws.
Yes. You assign the roles. You use your network, that curated dinner party we talked about, to assign Saturnian structure to Neptunian ideals.
Which honestly fundamentally challenges the modern hyper-capitalist interpretation of that phrase, your network is your net worth.
It really does.
Okay.
That phrase has a lot of baggage.
It does, because when I read that phrase, my immediate instinct is just to reject it. It sounds inherently manipulative.
It implies you're just using people for financial gain.
Right. So if the listener is operating under this high-minded 11th house energy, genuinely trying to foster humanitarian or community-driven projects, how do they reconcile that with treating their friends as a measure of net worth? It feels like we are applying a banking metric to human souls.
Well, I would argue we have to completely strip the financial connotation away from the word worth in this specific context.
Okay, so how should we define it?
If we look at the sociological concept of social capital, it isn't about extraction at all. It's about mobilization capability.
Okay, expand on that. Mobilization capability. What does that look like practically?
Imagine you have a brilliant Neptunian vision. Perhaps you want to launch a community garden, or a cooperative art space, or, I don't know, a grassroots political initiative.
Right, a big visionary idea.
Yes. But if your social circle consists entirely of cynical, passive individuals who only engage in superficial nightclub-level interactions.
Then your mobilization capability is effectively zero.
Exactly zero. Your idea dies in your head because you have absolutely no infrastructure to support it. Your net worth in the currency of societal impact is totally bankrupt.
Because you have no structural Saturn energy in your network to actualize the Neptune dream.
Exactly. But if you've spent the last few years authentically cultivating that dinner party,
If you've supported the architect, championed the novelist, listened to the psychologist.
yes, then you have built a reservoir of profound social capital based on mutual elevation.
Ah, I see.
When you present your vision to that room, they don't just nod politely. They offer their tools. They leverage their own networks for you.
So your worth is defined by the depth of trust and the combined capabilities of the collective you have nurtured.
That's it. It is the absolute antithesis of manipulation. It is the ultimate expression of symbiotic community.
Wow, that shifts the paradigm entirely. It implies that genuine friendship and immense social power are not mutually exclusive.
Not at all. In fact, under this astrology, one is the actual prerequisite for the other.
And that realization forces a massive shift in how we approach our professional lives, I think, which brings us directly to the career implications for April.
It does. Because you cannot cultivate this level of collective power and then just go back to sitting alone in a cubicle.
No, you really can't.
The professional directive for this month is a hard pivot. The era of the solo grind is essentially over, and the era of team winning is beginning.
I really want to spend significant time on this concept of the solo grind, especially for the listeners who operate as freelancers, independent contractors, solopreneurs.
It's a very common Gemini setup.
It is. Because the solo grind isn't just a business model. For a lot of highly intelligent, capable people, it is a psychological defense mechanism.
It's an armor built out of hyper-independence.
Exactly. When you are a Gemini, you learn very quickly that your processor runs just a bit faster than the people around you.
You can learn the new software in an afternoon.
Right. You can write the copy, you can design the logo, balance the books, and execute the entire marketing strategy.
And because you can do it all, you convince yourself that you must do it all.
The narrative you tell yourself is, if I delegate this, they will do it too slowly or they will do it wrong and I'll just have to fix it anyway.
It's safer to just do it myself.
Exactly. It's safer. But what does the astrology say about that right now?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture of the astrological transit, that hyper-independence is absolute anathema to the 11th house.
The universe is actively dismantling that defense mechanism, isn't it?
It is. Because the energetic ceiling of the solo grind is just basic math. You only have 24 hours in a day.
You can only burn your own cortisol for so long before the system breaks.
Right. And the Saturn-Neptune conjunction is demanding that you build something larger than your own shadow.
You cannot build a cathedral alone. You have to trust the masons.
Beautifully put. You have to trust the masons.
And the universe is going to provide a very sharp, sudden catalyst to force that delegation, right? We have to look at the geometry of April 9th.
Ah, yes. April 9th. Mercury, your ruling planet, forms a very sharp, highly active aspect.
We are talking about the kind of astrological friction that generates intense light and heat.
The forecast points to a sudden breakthrough in a communication-based project.
Like a podcast, a massive writing assignment, maybe a newsletter?
Yes. A sharp aspect, like a square or an opposition, implies a sudden confrontation with reality. It isn't a gentle, harmonious trine where things just flow easily.
It's an inciting incident.
It's a moment of critical mass.
Let's ground this in a very specific hypothetical scenario so the listener can really feel the texture of this energy.
Okay, let's hear it.
Imagine you are an independent creator. Let's say you've spent the last 8 months writing a highly niche, deeply researched newsletter about the intersection of technology and local government.
A very Gemini topic.
Very. You've been in the solo grind. You write it, you edit it, you hit publish every Tuesday, and the response is just a quiet, predictable trickle.
50 opens. A polite reply from a former colleague.
Great. You are effectively shouting your brilliance into the void.
The classic Neptunian feeling of invisible effort.
Exactly. But you keep doing it. Then, around April 9th, you hit publish on a piece you didn't even think was your best work.
And you close your laptop and go to sleep.
You go to sleep, you wake up the next morning, make your coffee, and casually open your analytics dashboard.
And the graph isn't a slow, incremental slope anymore.
No, it is a vertical wall.
The algorithm has picked it up, or a major aggregator has linked to it.
Or a prominent voice in the tech space retweeted it with a massive endorsement. Suddenly, your inbox is just vibrating.
It's not just passive likes anymore.
It is venture capitalists asking for consultations. It is local city council members asking to quote your research. It is literary agents asking if there is a book proposal.
In the span of 12 hours, the void has not only shouted back, it has handed you a megaphone and pushed you onto a global stage.
The realization hits you right in the chest. People are listening,
Yeah.
and the validation is intoxicating.
Oh, it's a huge rush. But the psychological whiplash is immense.
Because why?
Because in the immediate aftermath of that intoxicating validation comes the terrifying reality of scale.
Yes. Because yesterday, if you made a typo, 50 people saw it. Today, if you make a typo, 50,000 people see it.
And this is exactly where the Saturnian friction enters the narrative. The sudden expansion of your voice immediately outgrows your solo grind infrastructure.
You simply cannot respond to 300 consultation requests by yourself.
You cannot manage the sudden influx of critical feedback, meaty inquiries, and collaborative offers without a system.
You are suddenly forced to hire an assistant, partner with an agency, or form a collaborative team. You are forced out of isolation.
And that transition, moving from the solitary genius to the collaborative leader, it introduces a very specific kind of pain.
The forecast explicitly warns about friction with a group or organization regarding this new leadership role, doesn't
It
it?
does. Because when you step up to lead, you are no longer just managing your own brilliant ideas.
What are you managing?
You are managing the ego, the insecurities, and the pacing of other people.
Oh, the pacing. That's the hardest part for a Gemini.
Saturn in the 11th house guarantees that this leadership transition will not be a seamless coronation. It will be a test of endurance.
So let's say you form a partnership to expand that viral newsletter into a media company.
Okay.
You are suddenly sitting in a boardroom, either literal or virtual, with investors, co-founders, or community stakeholders.
And they do not move at your speed.
They don't. They require endless meetings to discuss things you've already figured out intuitively on Tuesday.
They push back on your vision because they are afraid of the risk. They are bogged down in the bureaucracy of the process.
That is the ultimate test of the Gemini patience. The instinct is to just say, you know what, this is too slow. I'm going back to doing it myself.
But if you retreat to the solo grind, you lose the scale.
You shrink back down.
Exactly. Saturn is the planet of time and legacy. It takes 29 years for Saturn to orbit the sun.
It does not deal in quick dopamine hits or viral moments.
No, it deals in decades. The friction you're experiencing with that group is the forge where your authority is being tested.
Saturn is essentially asking, are you mature enough to sit in the discomfort of other people's resistance?
Can you communicate your vision clearly enough to bring the skeptics along with you?
Can you set the necessary boundaries without alienating your base?
Exactly. It's the transition from being a fleeting participant in the culture to becoming a structural pillar of the culture.
When you endure that boardroom friction, when you successfully navigate the egos and build the infrastructure, you are laying down the foundation stones for a reputation that will literally last for decades.
You are building the social legacy we talked about at the very beginning of the deep dive.
And stepping into that level of profound public leadership inevitably alters the ecosystem of your private life, right?
It has to. You cannot undergo a metamorphosis of that magnitude in your career and your social networks without it sending shockwaves through your intimate relationships.
Which brings us to a fascinating psychological phenomenon outlined for April, the blurring of the lines.
The boundaries get very porous.
Right. When your social life is operating at this high vibration, intellectually electric frequency, the boundary between public collaboration and private intimacy becomes incredibly blurry.
We see this acutely around the full moon on April 2nd, particularly for those who are single.
Let's talk about the astrological geometry here, because it's vital.
It is. A full moon occurs when the sun and the moon are in exact opposition, creating maximum illumination.
So things that were hidden in the shadows of the subconscious are suddenly thrust into stark, undeniable light.
And for the single listener, this illumination hits the axis of friendship and romance.
The classic friends to lovers trope. But I don't want to treat this like a romantic comedy cliche.
No, the psychological mechanism behind this shift is profound. And it's deeply tied to how a Gemini specifically experiences attraction.
Let's dissect the Gemini attraction model then. While physical aesthetics obviously play a role for everyone,
Sure.
for a Gemini, the ultimate aphrodisiac is intellectual parity.
It is the rapid-fire exchange of ideas.
It is the ability of another person to catch your conversational serve and return it with topspin.
It's a great way to describe it.
So let's go back to that curated dinner party we designed earlier. Let's say there's someone at that table you've known for 3 years. Let's call them Alex.
Okay, Alex.
Alex has always been firmly categorized in your brain as a purely platonic entity. You've helped them move apartments. You've complained about your respective dating lives.
You've seen them exhausted and stressed out.
Exactly. The neurological pathway in your brain labeled Alex has absolutely zero romantic charge. It is a comfortable, safe, entirely desexualized loop.
The categorization is completely rigid.
Utterly rigid. But it's April 2nd. The full moon is pulling the tides. You are sitting at the table. The energy is electric, and the conversation shifts to one of these massive Neptunian community visions we talked about.
And suddenly, Alex leans forward.
They start articulating a perspective you had never even considered. Their eyes are lit up with that Aries fire.
They are commanding the room. They're synthesizing complex data points, speaking with immense passion and authority.
They are operating at peak intellectual frequency.
Exactly.
And you are sitting there watching them, and your brain attempts to run the standard Alex platonic loop, and the system just crashes.
The categorization fails.
It totally fails. In the span of about 4 seconds, the lighting shifts. You notice the exact cadence of their voice. You notice the way their hands move when they speak.
The realization hits you with the force of a physical blow.
You think, wait, have I been completely blind? Is this person incredible?
The transition from platonic safety to intense romantic intrigue happens instantaneously because the context of the interaction elevated.
You finally saw their mind operating at a level that matched yours.
It's a complete paradigm shift. The veil of familiarity drops, and you see the underlying potential.
But what about the listeners who are already in committed long-term partnerships? Because the energetic demands of April apply to them just as fiercely, right?
They do, but the threat is different. The threat isn't blindness to a friend. The threat is the slow asphyxiation of the relationship rut.
The rut. It is so insidious because it doesn't look like a crisis.
No, a crisis is loud. A crisis is an argument or a betrayal.
A rut is just comfortable silence. It's a Tuesday night. You both get home from your respective jobs. The kinetic energy of the day is depleted.
You put on the soft clothes.
You order from the exact same takeout place you've ordered from for 3 years. You sit on opposite ends of the couch, scrolling through separate feeds on your phones.
While a television show you've both already seen plays in the background as ambient noise.
Right. There is no hostility. There is love, certainly. But there is absolutely zero curiosity.
Neurologically speaking, you are starving the relationship of dopamine.
Explain that. Why does that happen?
Well, when a relationship is new, the brain is flooded with neurotransmitters because everything is a discovery. You are mapping a new human being.
It's all novel data.
Exactly. But after years of routine, the brain becomes incredibly efficient. It knows exactly what the partner is going to say before they say it.
It knows the routine.
And the brain stops dispensing the chemical rewards. The relationship effectively flatlines into a state of parallel existence.
Which is why the astrological prescription for couples this month is so aggressive. It basically says, get out of the house.
Yeah.
Your relationship requires fresh air and intellectual stimulation.
It is demanding an injection of novelty.
Because novelty is the only way to hack the neurological system and force it to see the partner anew.
And we have that Aries energy available to act as the spark right now. Aries is the initiator. It is the cardinal fire that begins the entire zodiacal wheel.
So instead of the Tuesday night couch routine, you take that Aries energy and you apply it to the shared calendar.
You buy tickets to an immersive theater experience neither of you understands.
Yes. Or you sign up for a debate regarding local city planning. You co-host one of those high-stakes, curated dinner parties.
The psychological impact of placing your partnership in a novel, slightly challenging environment is immense.
And you are forced to navigate an unfamiliar social setting together. You drop the roommate dynamic.
You get to observe your partner interacting with strangers. You hear them tell a story you haven't heard in years.
You see them debate a new topic. The brain registers this new data, dopamine is released, and the romantic bond is suddenly associated with excitement again.
You remember that the person sitting next to you is a complex, evolving, autonomous individual, not just a fixture in your living room.
You reignite the intellectual friction that drew you together in the first place. I really love the mechanics of that.
It's very powerful.
But we have to address the structural reality of this entire month. We have painted a picture of a massive, expansive April.
Hosting curated dinners, launching collaborative media empires, investing in community projects, buying tickets to immersive theater.
All of this requires a foundation. It requires resources, capital. We have to examine the financial architecture of the month because the astrology here is deeply complex and, frankly, inherently contradictory.
The financial landscape of April is bifurcated, really. The first half of the month, leading up to April 20th, is bathed in the collaborative energy of the 11th house.
Right.
The directive is diversification and shared resources. It is an incredibly fertile time for exploring crowdfunding, angel investing within your network, or pooling resources for a joint venture.
But right alongside that fertile collaborative energy, the forecast drops a massive flashing warning sign regarding the influence of Neptune.
Ah, yes, the Neptune fog.
It explicitly states, because Neptune is involved, stay away from anything that feels shady or lacks a clear, legally binding contract.
It's a very stern warning.
And I have to pause here because this creates a severe cognitive dissonance based on everything we've discussed so far.
How so?
Well, for the past 40 minutes, we have hammered home the mantra, trust your visionary network, cultivate authentic relationships, your social capital is your power.
Right.
We've told the listener to lean completely into their community, and now, the moment money is introduced, the astrology says, wait, watch your back, demand a contract, assume the fog is hiding something.
It feels contradictory.
It does. How is the listener supposed to navigate that? If Alex from the dinner party, the person whose intellect they deeply respect, the person who shares their utopian vision...
If Alex pitches them a collaborative investment.
Right. How do they balance 11th house trust with Neptune paranoia?
This raises an incredibly important question about the mechanics of delusion and the cognitive biases that govern human interaction.
Break that down for us.
We have to look at how Neptune operates when it touches the material realm of finance. Neptune is the planet of the idealized dream.
It desires a world without boundaries.
Exactly, where everyone operates on pure, high-minded intentions. When you combine Neptune's idealism with Aries' impulsive enthusiasm, you create the perfect psychological environment for a terrible financial decision.
Because the enthusiasm essentially blinds you to the risk.
Exactly. In behavioral economics, there is a concept known as the halo effect.
I've heard of that. What is it exactly?
It is a cognitive bias where our overall impression of a person influences how we feel and think about their character across all domains.
So if you respect Alex's artistic vision and you enjoy their company at a dinner party...
The halo effect tricks your brain into assuming Alex is also a meticulous project manager and a brilliant financial strategist.
Even if Alex has absolutely no background in finance whatsoever.
Precisely. Neptune weaponizes the halo effect. Alex pitches you the idea. Your 11th house loves the community aspect.
Your Aries energy loves the thrill of the launch.
Your Neptune energy is completely enchanted by the vision of how this project will heal the world.
And because you are operating in this high vibration, emotionally elevated state, asking for a balance sheet feels, I don't know, crass.
Demanding a legally binding contract feels like an insult to the friendship. You think, we share a soul-deep vision. A contract is so corporate and distrustful.
And that is exactly where the trap snaps shut, because shared vision does not pay the vendors.
No, it doesn't.
Shared vision does not outline the equity split when the project either fails or wildly succeeds.
Which is why Saturn is so crucial here. Saturn demands the contract. And we have to reframe what a contract actually is.
It's not an insult.
No, a contract is not an assumption of malice. A contract is an act of profound clarity. It is a boundary.
It protects both of you.
Exactly. When you say to Alex, I love this vision and I want to invest, so let's get the operating agreement drafted by a lawyer, you're actually protecting the friendship.
You are removing the ambiguity that inevitably breeds resentment.
If the visionary friend balks at the idea of a contract, if they accuse you of killing the vibe or not trusting them, that is the Neptune fog attempting to manipulate you.
That is the exact moment you recognize the deal as shady and walk away.
Exactly.
That is such a vital reframing. Boundaries protect the bond. Okay, so that's the treacherous navigation of the first half of the month.
But then the geometry shifts dramatically.
Yes, on April 20th, the sun moves out of the fast-paced, collaborative 11th house and sinks into Taurus, illuminating your 12th house.
And the forecast notes that around April 22nd, this shift will bring hidden financial matters to the surface.
Specifically things you thought were closed. It's referred to as a cleanup transit.
The transition from the 11th house to the 12th house is one of the most jarring psychological shifts in all of astrology.
It really is a hard break.
You go from the crowded town square to the isolated monastery. The 12th house rules the subconscious, the unseen, the things we sweep under the rug.
The psychological baggage we carry and the karmic debts we owe.
When the sun enters this domain, the lights turn on in the basement.
So, practically speaking, what does a 12th house financial resurfacing look like?
Well, it rarely looks like a brand new opportunity. It looks like an echo from the past.
Give me an example.
It is the medical bill from 8 months ago that got lost in the mail and is now threatening collections.
Oh, that's the worst.
It is the realization that an auto-renewing subscription for a software you haven't used since 2024 is still quietly draining $40 a month from an old account.
It could be an email from an accountant saying a tax return from 2 years ago was flagged for a missing schedule and needs immediate amendment.
It's all the administrative ghosts coming back to haunt you.
And it's so easy to look at those things and think, I am too busy revolutionizing my industry and hosting visionary salons to deal with a $40 subscription or a missing tax form.
But the psychological toll of ignoring the 12th house is devastating.
I would relate this to the psychological concept of the Zeigarnik effect, which basically states that people remember uncompleted or interrupted tasks much better than completed tasks.
Yes, every unresolved financial issue, no matter how small, represents an open psychological loop.
It's cognitive load.
Exactly. You might not be consciously thinking about that unfiled tax return while you are moderating a panel discussion, but your subconscious knows it's there.
It's eating up RAM in the background.
Yes. Your nervous system is constantly allocating a small percentage of its processing power to maintain the anxiety of that open loop.
If you have 10 open loops, your baseline state is just a low-level, continuous hum of dread.
So when the forecast calls this a cleanup transit and urges you to use the last 10 days of April to settle the debts and organize the receipts, it isn't just giving you a chore list.
What is it doing?
It is giving you the mechanism to reclaim your cognitive bandwidth. You have to go into the basement, confront the ghosts, pay the lingering bill, cancel the subscription, and close the loops.
Because if you don't clear the cache, the entire operating system is going to crash when May arrives with even more external demands.
Which actually serves as a necessary, sobering transition into the final and arguably most critical dimension of our deep dive.
Right. Health and spiritual growth. Because everything we have mapped out so far, the expansion of the network, the friction of leadership, the management of sudden virality.
The vigilance required against financial illusion.
Right. All of it requires an astronomical amount of energy.
We have outlined a month that is intellectually thrilling, but physically and mentally grueling.
The processor is running at maximum capacity 204/7, and the forecast identifies the specific, inevitable threat of this pace immediately.
It states, because your mind is moving so fast this month, mental burnout is your biggest risk.
And mental burnout is a distinctly different pathology than physical exhaustion, isn't it?
It is. If you work a manual labor job for 12 hours, your muscles deplete their glycogen stores, you become physically fatigued, you sleep, and you recover.
The boundaries are clear.
Exactly. But mental burnout, particularly for an air sign ruled by Mercury, involves the absolute fraying of the nervous system.
The boundaries of the intellect do not just shut off when you lie down in bed.
No, the gears keep turning.
And the forecast points to a very specific trigger for this burnout. It's not just the sheer volume of work, it's the existential weight of the data you are processing.
It brings us right back to the heavy planetary players.
It says, with the Saturn-Neptune energy, you might find yourself obsessively worrying about the state of the world or your place in the future.
This raises an important question, really. We need to deconstruct why the Gemini listener is so uniquely vulnerable to this specific brand of global existential dread right now.
Let's do that. Why is Gemini so susceptible?
It comes down to the architecture of the Gemini archetype as the messenger. You are biologically and astrologically wired to intake, synthesize, and distribute data.
You are a highly porous intellectual sponge.
You are. You read the geopolitical analysis over breakfast. You listen to a podcast about climate tipping points during your commute.
You absorb the financial anxieties of your friends during lunch, and you analyze the sociological impacts of artificial intelligence before bed.
You are literally mainlining the collective anxiety of the human race.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yes. Mainlining anxiety.
Precisely. And right now, that collective data stream is being filtered through Neptune, which represents the vast, unfathomable ocean of global suffering, confusion, and shifting truths.
And Saturn, which represents limitation, structural collapse, and the terrifying weight of reality.
So when your fast-moving, porous Gemini mind attempts to process the entirety of the Saturn-Neptune global crisis, it encounters an impossible equation.
The sheer volume of the world's problems basically creates a buffer overflow error in your brain.
You look at the macro-level suffering, you realize the limitations of your individual capacity to fix it, and the result is a profound, paralyzing nihilism.
You think, what is the point of launching my community project or writing my newsletter if the ice caps are melting and the global economy is teetering?
And that paralysis is the mental burnout.
Yeah.
You short-circuit.
So the crucial question becomes, what is the spiritual mechanism for breaking that paralysis? How do you maintain your role as the social visionary without being crushed by the vision?
Well, the forecast provides a deeply pragmatic spiritual task to combat this. It says, your spiritual task in April is grounding your ideas. It is not enough to have 1,000 thoughts. You need to anchor one or two into reality.
This is the application of Saturn as a healing agent rather than a heavy burden.
Exactly. When you're spinning in that Neptunian dread, you have 1,000 brilliant, frantic ideas about how everything is connected and how everything is failing.
But thoughts that remain purely in the intellectual ether just generate internal static. They just feed the anxiety loop.
To break the loop, you have to force the energy downward into the material plane. You have to take the 999 unmanageable thoughts and let them go.
And just grab one.
Yes. You choose the one metric you can actually influence.
Right. You can't solve the global supply chain crisis today, but you can finish writing the 3-page outline for your local co-op initiative.
You can't heal the ideological divide of the entire country. But you can have one difficult, honest, structured conversation with a collaborator who is resisting your leadership.
By forcing an idea through the friction of reality and making a tangible, completed action, you prove to your nervous system that you still have agency.
You anchor yourself in the present moment.
And the forecast goes a step further, offering a literal, physical methodology for this grounding process.
It states, physical movement, especially walking or cycling, is essential to help process the high-frequency energy moving through your nervous system.
I really want to focus on the physics of this advice because I think it is brilliant.
It makes a lot of sense somatically.
It does. I like to conceptualize the Gemini nervous system during this month as a house sitting in the middle of a massive high-voltage electrical storm.
Okay, I can picture that.
The house is being continuously bombarded by lightning strikes of insight, collective anxiety, visionary ideas, and social friction.
So the voltage is just constantly spiking.
Right. And if a house is taking that kind of electrical load without a grounding system, the current inevitably surges through the internal wiring, blows out the electrical panel, and starts a fire in the walls.
And that fire is the mental burnout we just described.
Exactly. But what does a lightning rod do? A lightning rod doesn't stop the thunderstorm. It doesn't change the weather.
It simply provides a highly conductive, direct, and safe path for that massive electrical charge to travel down the side of the house and discharge harmlessly into the deep earth.
That is a phenomenal visualization of somatic processing.
When you shut your laptop, step away from the switchboard and go for a long, rhythmic, vigorous walk, or you get on a bicycle and pedal hard for an hour.
You are physically manifesting a lightning rod.
The rhythmic, bilateral stimulation of walking or cycling forces the chaotic, spinning, high-frequency energy trapped in your skull down through your spine into your legs and pushes it directly into the pavement.
You are literally discharging the kinetic energy. This isn't about burning calories or achieving cardiovascular fitness.
No, this is emergency mental hygiene. If you do not physically process the frequency, it will literally tear the circuitry apart.
And clearing that internal static is absolutely vital for the final critical date mentioned in the entire forecast.
The text circles April 25th with a very specific, almost ominous instruction.
It says, on April 25th, a quiet moment of reflection will reveal a truth you've been avoiding. Trust your gut. Your subconscious is working overtime to protect you.
A truth you've been avoiding.
That
hits heavily.
It really does. It connects directly back to the 12th house energy we discussed earlier, the realm of the subconscious and the hidden.
It does. Think about the trajectory of the month up to this point.
Yeah.
You have spent the first 3.5 weeks entirely outward-facing.
You have been networking, leading, managing friction, pitching visions, absorbing data, and navigating sudden breakthroughs.
You have been so loud, and the environment has been so loud, that the quiet foundational voice of your intuition has been completely drowned out.
But by April 25th, the sun is firmly in Taurus, in that quiet 12th house.
And if you have been doing the grounding work, If you have been walking, discharging the energy, and anchoring your ideas, the internal waters finally stop churning.
The silt settles to the bottom, and the water becomes clear enough for you to look down and see what is actually lying on the riverbed.
And what you see might be deeply inconvenient.
That's why it's a truth you've been avoiding. Your fast-moving, hyper-rational Gemini intellect is incredibly skilled at self-deception.
You can rationalize almost any situation if it serves the immediate goal.
But the subconscious does not rationalize. The gut does not negotiate.
What kind of unavoidable truths are we talking about here?
Well, it could be a structural realization about your career. You might be sitting in the quiet after a massive collaborative success, and the gut says, you don't actually want to be the CEO of this project.
You like the idea of it, but the reality of managing these egos is killing your spirit. You need to step down.
That would require immense courage to admit.
Or it could be relational. You might look at Alex, the friend from the dinner party, who suddenly looks so attractive on April 2nd.
And in the quiet of the 25th, you realize that wasn't genuine romantic compatibility. That was just my ego being validated by their intellect. We would be a terrible couple.
Or conversely, it might be the realization that a decade-long friendship has fundamentally run its course, that you no longer share a vision, and that the connection is now actively draining your energy.
The friction of acknowledging those truths is very high.
Very high. But the mandate is clear. Trust your gut. Your rational brain will try to talk you out of the realization because it fears the conflict.
It fears the awkward conversation.
But your subconscious is working overtime to protect your long-term energetic reserves. It knows that if you ignore the truth on the 25th, you will spend the rest of the year carrying the dead weight of an unaligned partnership or a false ambition.
You have to honor the quiet revelation.
That is the ultimate act of self-preservation in a month, defined by giving yourself to the collective.
It is. Wow. Okay, let's pull the camera all the way back. We have traversed an immense amount of psychological and astrological terrain today.
We really have.
We have mapped a month that is nothing short of a crucible for your identity. To distill the absolute core message of April 2026, this is the month you master the power of the collective.
You are the conduit. You are the bridge between disparate people and utopian ideas.
You are being asked to step out of the protective shell of the solo grind, to endure the friction of leadership, and to use your brilliant structuring mind to chart a tangible path forward for your community.
It is a heavy mantle requiring immense discernment, boundaries, and physical grounding, but it is the necessary evolution of the Gemini spirit.
To anchor all of this, to give you a touchstone when the switchboard gets too loud, I want to read the specific April affirmation provided for you.
I think that's a great idea.
I want you to let the cadence of these words just settle into your nervous system. I am a magnet for visionary ideas and supportive people. My voice has the power to inspire change, and I use my connections to build a better future for all. I am focused, I am connected, and I am heard.
I am connected, and I am heard. That is the true north for the entire month.
It is. So what does this all mean? We began this journey talking about the terrifying power surge of a fully illuminated switchboard.
We talked about moving from the chaotic noise of the nightclub to the profound synthesis of the curated dinner party.
You are stepping into a landscape where the boundaries between public legacy and private intimacy are fundamentally altering.
You are navigating the fog of financial illusions, the spark of sudden attraction, and the heavy, demanding weight of Saturnian leadership.
You possess the architectural blueprints now.
You understand the mechanics of the friction, and you have the tools to discharge the lightning.
But I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to sit with after the audio fades. Something to chew on while you take that long, vigorous walk to ground your energy.
It's an important question.
We have spent an hour dissecting the immense power of your voice to inspire change this month. We have analyzed the inevitable friction and discomfort that arises when you assume the mantle of leadership and demand structure for your vision. Here is the question you must confront in the quiet of your own mind. If your voice truly possesses the power to shift the paradigm of your community right now, what is the ultimate cost of choosing not to speak up?
What happens to the people who need your vision?
Exactly. And what happens to your own spiritual evolution if you allow the intimidation of leadership to force you back into the comfortable, silent safety of the solo grind?
That is the defining test of the social visionary.
It is the question that shapes the legacy. Thank you for walking through the fire with us on this deep dive into your Gemini April 2026 roadmap.
It's going to be an incredible month.
As always, ensure you look at your sun and rising signs to get the complete multidimensional view of your astrological landscape. Until next time, stay grounded, trust the gut, and keep connecting.